Hey Josh, how you doing?
Not doing too bad, Jason. Living and thriving. How about yourself?
Not too bad, man. Just doing this thing that we usually do every week. How's your week been going?
Oh, not too bad. Just a bunch of work and called in sick on Thursday, as you know.
So, as you know, this past week, well, within the past week, we had a few tragedies in the U.S. And first of all, I want to send my regards to those families out there that are dealing with the loss and that were affected within those tragedies. But I feel like we need to talk a little bit about the tragedies and what that means for us as a country going forward.
I agree. What tragedies would you be referring to? Would you be referring to El Paso and Dayton?
Absolutely. Well, and California as well with the shooting at the Garlic Festival that occurred
Yeah.
as well.
That was last week, wasn't it?
That was last week.
And
And then earlier this week we actually had a stabbing in California that killed four and injured two more. And I feel like we need to, well, not that we need to, but I feel like we should talk about this. I think it's a very big issue that kind of needs, some discussion.
obviously, this is a very hot topic, so I agree with you, Jason. We do need to speak about this.
So,
So, the question is, where do we begin?
well, at the end of the day, I mean, we could begin anywhere really. Uh, we'll go to we'll go to the carnage that's been left behind. We'll start there. Is I see a lot of trending. I spend a lot of time on social media, and I tell people it's not a good idea, but unfortunately, I'm one of them. But a lot of people are blaming the president of the United States and holding him responsible for the actions that were procured by these people. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I have heard, I've actually read a lot of comments about how the president's rhetoric is responsible for the hatred of these perpetrators to go out there and gun down people. And in my honest opinion, I I disagree. I don't think a president can be responsible for that unless they are blatantly telling people to go out and gun people down. I don't I don't think you can really jump through all the mental gymnastics to say that because Trump is so set on border security and illegal immigrants make it into a lot of his speeches, for his topic, that in this way that this would make somebody want to go out and gun down Latinos. You know, it's just it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, first let's talk about a couple of the demographics of the El Paso shooter in itself. And it was reported that the El Paso shooter was from the Dallas area. So I don't know about you, but I don't think I would drive all that way just to do something like that. I feel like it could be that if I was doing something like to that extreme to make a statement, it could be done anywhere. Whether it be in my hometown or the next town over. Like, why would you drive all the way from Dallas to El Paso just to make a statement? Because I mean, you grew up in in the Southwest. I grew up in the Southwest, and it's a highly Hispanic populated area.
Right.
And so why would somebody go through all the trouble to drive all the way down there, risk getting pulled over, carrying a weapon, and just to carry out his manifesto or whatever you want to call it?
That is a good point. As the reports say, that he drove 9 hours from the Dallas metro to El Paso. The reasoning that they're giving us is because this supposedly was a Walmart where a lot of known immigrants from Mexico and other southern countries shop at. But you bring up the good point, from the Dallas area, there's plenty of Hispanic neighborhoods and spots that he could have hit if he was dead set on gunning down Latinos. Obviously, I don't want anybody gunned down anywhere, but the whole story seems a little bit fishy. And as we know from past events, the media has been known to really take ideas and run with it. For example, Columbine. They they created this narrative that it was about bullying and about how these perpetrators back in 1999 were bullied. And many people who've investigated the story have said that no, that was not the case. That was just something that some kids went with and the media took it and ran with it. But there was actually a lot more to it than just, oh, these guys were picked on, because these particular two guys were not picked on. So again, a lot of this, a lot of these things that the media tells me about this shooter in Dallas or shooter in El Paso, I don't know what to believe at this point.
Well, let's go back to everybody deciding to blame President Trump for setting these ideological thoughts into people's heads. And to be honest with you, at the end of the day, if somebody tells me that it's okay to go kill somebody, it doesn't mean I'm going to go out and kill somebody because I agree with that person or because this person tells me it's okay. You can do it. It's not going to hurt anybody. You're not going to feel bad about it. Just because somebody tries to encourage somebody, and not saying that the president was trying to encourage somebody to go out there and kill people, but just because he says, or his manifesto, quote unquote, says that he was a Trump supporter and he idolized the invasion that Trump referred to as we need to kill invaders, things of that nature, that doesn't necessarily mean that Trump is behind the people that did this. I mean, let's go back to Sandy Hook or Pulse nightclub. Nobody blamed Obama. In fact, I don't think that they had any real reason other than what he believed in at that point. And Obama didn't get blamed for that. I mean, not everybody, but a good portion of people have some people have super radical beliefs, and they just it happens by nature. We don't choose to have radical beliefs, but there's things that we feel very strong on, and whether we choose to act on them is on us. It's not on anybody else. That's not their fault that you took something that you believed in and decided to make it real.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that's another good point. Bringing up the Obama administration, of course, no sane person at the time blamed him for Sandy Hook or the Pulse nightclub or any shooting that happened during his 8 years as president, and nor should they, because none of it's his fault. What people criticized him on during his administration was they feel like cops were being gunned down because he was speaking hate against them, and I would have to disagree. I don't think he was speaking hate. He just maybe wasn't showing as much support as he could have. But at the end of the day, the Dallas shooter back in 2016 who shot down those 5 cops, that's all on him. He took his beliefs to the next level. And that is not Obama's fault. That is nobody's fault. That's not George Bush's fault. And it's definitely not Trump's fault that this El Paso shooter drove 9 hours, fully prepared, and went in and gunned down shoppers.
And I can't, again, I'm gonna stress this throughout this episode. I can't imagine what the families are going through, and we're not trying to be insensitive by any means. We're just trying to analyze and assess the situation from an outside perspective as gun supporters and gun owners, as just trying to figure out why somebody would do it. But what really surprised me about the whole El Paso shooting was how quickly the cops obtained his manifest, and how the first thing that came out, and one of the biggest topics that everybody focused on, was he was a Trump supporter.
It seemed a little bit too convenient, didn't it?
It seemed extremely convenient. I mean, everybody wants to label Trump supporters as racist, bigots, and honestly, just because you believe in somebody doesn't make you racist or a bigot. Maybe you believe in some of their ideals. Maybe you believe in them as a person, you know. Do I agree that the President of the United States says the smartest things? No. In fact, I think he should not be on social media, and I feel like he probably needs somebody to review his statements before he says them. But that's here nor there. And when we going to Ohio as well, it just seemed convenient that all 3 shooters happened to be white Trump supporters, which made no sense to me at all, because I feel like when Sandy Hook happened and Pulse nightclub, it was more of an they were going for an Islamic demographic. You know, he had Islamic beliefs, this and that, and now we're changing it to white Trump supporters. Are we really that naive that we would believe our media is telling us the truth?
Actually, I'll have to correct you there. The Ohio shooter in Dayton, he actually, on his social media, they found that he had support for Elizabeth Warren and Antifa, and so he was actually more on the left wing of the spectrum.
Okay.
But again, it's the fact that in less than 24 hours, you had somebody on the extreme right, supposedly, shoot up a Walmart, and then you had somebody who supposedly is on the extreme left side of the spectrum shoot up a nightclub, I guess is what it was in Dayton, wasn't it?
It was like a popular night spot. I don't know if it was a club in
Yeah,
Denver.
and obviously had a lot of blacks who attended, and which is who they say he was going for, and apparently shot his sister too. But it's all rather very convenient, and the fact that the media loves to fuel the fire, it's almost like there's a force in this country that's trying to divide big time, and they use these tragedies to do so.
Well, let me stop. Well, let me touch on this for a minute. The Dayton, Ohio shooter shot his sister before shooting anybody else. That right there should have given you absolutely every note that you needed to look at this guy and understand that he had no remorse for anything. I'm telling you, there's no way I could gun down one of my family members. Absolutely none.
And it just goes to show that this is obviously something that nobody knows why these people are snapping. There's only theories out there. And everybody, for the most part, they're looking for something to blame, something in our control that we can control that would put a cap on all these mass shootings. Because no doubt, every single one of them is a tragedy. And we're scared as a society. Maybe you and me aren't scared sitting here right now, but people in the areas that these happened and people who have been affected, they are scared and they're looking for an answer, and they're looking to our leaders to make policies or do whatever to stop this.
So a lot of people are pushing for bigger regulation and more legislation to help control gun sales in the United States. Do you really feel like that's going to fix the problem?
Me personally, I don't think it's going to fix the problem. It will definitely change things, but I don't think in the way that they're intending.
I don't think I have to agree with you on that. I don't think that limiting or changing any kind of legislation at this point in time is going to fix the problem. Because I know we talked earlier this week, we had talked about the fact that when somebody's determined to hurt people, whether it be in a mass form or whether it be individually, it doesn't matter what kind of weapon they can get their hands on. If they're determined to do it, they're going to do it. And if it's not guns, it's going to be knives. If it's not knives, it could be a bow and arrow, a crossbow. It could be a homemade bomb. We don't know.
It doesn't have to be anything. It can be your hands.
It could be a car.
It can be a car. Yeah, exactly. It can be a plane.
People don't, and whenever this happens, whenever this kind of a tragedy happens, which, the 24 that occurred during Obama's term, I mean, that's a lot of lost life that could have been prevented. And we'll get into that a little bit later, especially looking at the El Paso shooting. But one of the things that stands out more than anything is the fact that so many people are gun shy and they're scared. Anytime that they see a gun, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to do anything with it. That's not the right attitude to have. You need to be able to see a gun and know how to respond to a gun. I'm not talking a gun that's on somebody's hip. When somebody is obviously, you're not going to walk around in public with an AR-15. You're just not. Or an AK-47. You're not going to, common sense, guys. I mean, it's mind-blowing to think that nobody thought about this, before these events occurred. I mean, you wouldn't carry your AR-15 around in public, would you?
Absolutely not.
I don't know.
I guess I would have to ask, we'll start with you. How were you introduced to guns? And at what age?
So I was, my parents have always had guns ever since I was really young. I couldn't really put an age on it because they were always just kind of around. My dad never locked his guns up. He sat down and he talked to us when we were old enough to understand. When we were playing cops in the backyard and we had toy guns, he sat down and he talked to us and he kind of explained to us how guns work and what they do. And he made it, and he stressed it throughout our entire life. And especially, I'll never forget this. I'd be playing Call of Duty or I'd be playing Halo, whatever. And he'd always look at me and be like, hey, in real life, you only die one time. And that's it.
Yeah.
And so I guess it was always ingrained to me that guns aren't toys. Guns are a tool. I look at them as a tool. And, because you use them to hunt, you use them to defend yourself. They're a tool. Yes, they're a weapon, whatever. But to me, they're a tool. And I guess that's how I was raised to look at them. I mean, what about you?
Well, and I was introduced to guns mostly on the gun range. I would say at the age of 7, my dad took me out, and actually this would be in the country, and I shot my first .22 rifle, and that was my first memory of shooting a gun. And yeah, I was always taught. My dad always stressed, never point a gun at a person, whether it is loaded or unloaded. You never point a gun at a human being unless you intend to kill. And anything worth shooting once is worth shooting twice.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right.
Now, you grew up in kind of a rural Arizona, right?
Yes.
And see, I think that's definitely a key difference between you and somebody who grew up maybe in like Los Angeles or New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Because people out there don't shoot recreationally. They might go to the range and shoot, but when you're living out in kind of you got open country in the area, I mean, you go out and shoot pop cans for fun, or you can go shoot coyotes or whatever you want. So, of course, you grew up with the mentality of a gun is a tool.
Yeah.
As opposed in the city, usually if anybody has a gun in the city, they are using it for defense, unless they are a criminal. They're using it with the possibility that they will kill a human being with it if they ever have to. God forbid, but if you ever have to. And that was kind of how I was raised.
It was kind of interesting. I was reading an article on Facebook today put out by 88 Tactical. If any of you listeners have ever been to the Omaha area and know what 88 Tactical is, it's a really nice gun range. Sits off of I-80. But anyways, they were advertising a free active shooter course for students and parents. And they also sell bulletproof backpack inserts for kids as well, which I didn't know they made, which I thought was kind of cool.
No idea.
Which I wish that there was more of that kind of proactiveness towards mass shootings instead of looking at the negative. There's always a way that we can improve ourselves to be better or be more prepared. And I mean, Dwight Eisenhower always said, you cannot simultaneously prepare and prevent war. And that goes towards anything, whether it be a mass shooting or just a home invasion. You can prep to be the best in that situation, or you can be the best at preventing yourself from being put in that situation. But you can't be both. 100% cannot be both, because you're never going to get anywhere trying to be both. And I guess for me, I always wanted to be the best at being able to defend myself. And that's why when I read about these things and I hear things like the El Paso shooter, just walking through the front doors of a Walmart with an AK-47, how I would have reacted in that situation, seeing a man carrying an assault rifle into a department store. To me, my first reaction would have been to try and do something about it, because the events that were going to follow would outweigh whatever damage I would have done to the individual. Because for all I know, maybe it was a toy gun. I didn't know this. That could have been defended in court. But at that point in time, he's walking into a department store with a rifle, an automatic rifle, and he has no reason to be in there with that. I mean, how would you have reacted? Or how do you think you would have reacted in that situation, Josh?
Honestly, I have no idea, because a lot of it just depends. If I was in that parking lot and I was behind him, absolutely. I would pull my Smith & Wesson that I always carry with me in public, for all of you who are thinking of sneaking up on me. But absolutely. I'm an opportunist. I would like to think I'm an opportunist in those situations. I would think that I would stop the situation before it progressed. That's how I was trained, and that's how I was raised.
And a great example of this, and there hasn't been much national news coverage of this, which is unfortunate, but the off-duty firefighter in Missouri that stopped a man at a Walmart carrying a rifle and what they reported to be over 1,000 rounds, which I don't know how you loaded 1,000 rounds into magazines, but with my experience, that'd be a lot of magazines and a lot of weight. But the point being, an unarmed or an armed citizen stopped a man from maybe committing another mass shooting within a week. So it does help. And to those of you that are scared to educate yourselves on guns, don't be afraid, because realistically, it could save your life one day, or it could save your kids. And again, I'm not trying to be insensitive towards those that are affected by these shootings, but having that education might have helped in that situation. But not even that, Josh. Let's talk about general first aid in situations like this. Like when Von Mar got shot up back in, what was that, 2007 in Omaha. I actually got the opportunity to speak with one of the guys that was on the SWAT team that responded to that event, and he'll never forget how scared everybody was. And there was a lady that got shot in the leg, and nobody rendered first aid to her, and she bled out on the Von Mar floor because nobody rendered first aid to her. And it's simple things like that. Like, I understand people get panic and they have that fight or flight instinct. But at the end of the day, like, once all that's gone, you have to know how to treat. Yeah, you don't have to be a surgeon. You don't have to be a battle, combat medic. You don't have to be a paramedic. but at least have some general knowledge of how to stop bleeding. Educate yourselves on how to use a tourniquet. I carry a tourniquet in my car because you never know when you're going to need one, whether it be a car accident, whether it be a situation like this. They're a great thing to have, and they're really easy to use. If you don't know how to use one, educate yourself. There's a million YouTube tutorials on how to use them. And just carrying one with you could save somebody's life, whether it be your own or somebody else's. And what do you think about people being more educated? How do you think education could benefit us in the future when it comes to mass shootings?
Honestly, man, it really impresses me how many people don't know basic CPR or first aid. And like you said, back in 2007, that horrible event that happened at Westroads Mall in Omaha, that a lot of those people bled out and died. And that's the worst. I would think that's the worst way how to die from one of those. That would be worse than taking a bullet to the head.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think that there should be more education on how to give CPR or just basic first aid. But it's just I guess amazes me that all this information is at our fingertips. There's like you said, you can look these videos up on YouTube and people don't utilize it. And a lot of people are just oblivious and they don't care. And these are the people that I see throwing their hat in the ring, and they are trying to talk to us about gun policy when they don't even know how to render first aid to a victim or give them CPR. And it's like, how can you tell me anything?
And you don't have to be an expert in first aid. Just general first aid. How do you stop bleeding? I was a Boy Scout, and learning tourniquets, handmade tourniquets, you could do with a purse strap. I mean, you're in Walmart, for God's sakes. You know, there's a million things you could have used. Use your belt, use your shoelace, whatever you can. But at least give that person a fighting chance. And it just shows that so many people would rather just run instead of try and be that guy. Now, remember when Jared Loeffner shot up, it was a Gabrielle Gifford shooting. I don't remember what year it was, but it was in Tucson, Arizona at a Safeway. It's kind of funny because I worked for Safeway at that time. I didn't work in that store, but I worked for Safeway. And there was a big story put out about that. And unfortunately, we did lose some people in that shooting. But we ended up in a situation where those people that got shot ran into the store. And the people, obviously mass chaos, everything kind of stopped. You're kind of trying to figure out what's going on, trying to get people into cover, things like that. And the store clerks and customers actually started rendering aid to some of these victims that had been hit by bullets or been trampled on or run down or whatever happened. But I remember because they had to shut that store down for 4 weeks just to get it cleaned up from that incident. So it does happen, and I feel like I think that as a country and as just United States citizens, we need to protect what's ours, and we need to take care of what's ours, and that includes every individual that's in this country, whether black, Mexican, or black, Hispanic, white, whatever race you want it to be. We're all here together, and we need to take care of each other together. So I guess where do we go from here? I mean, what's next?
Nobody really knows, but I'll tell you what's not next. Very aggressive legislation to control the sale of guns. I definitely do not think that is the answer, in my honest opinion. I honestly believe that more concealed carry classes, I wish people would voluntarily take these classes. I wish they were more available. I wish more of my fellow law-abiding citizens would arm themselves, because I don't know about you, man, but if you and me were at an event together, whether we went together or we just ran into each other and somebody started shooting and each of us had our arms, I would feel twice as better knowing that you were there with a firearm, just like me, ready to stop that perpetrator if we could.
100%. And I know guys, military guys that carry everywhere they go, and that's the reason. One of my buddies who's currently overseas right now, he always says, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And surprisingly, this is what surprised me the most about Texas is that's a very big gun state. how are there not, like, you would think that at some point there would have been somebody there that was either open carrying or carrying concealed at some point.
And actually, there was a gentleman who was concealed carrying. He was former military, or he might have been current. They say he was in his uniform, and he actually saved a lot of kids' lives during that. He didn't pull out his gun and shoot the shooter, as you know, because the shooter was arrested, but he was able to be that security while they got to a safer space during that shooting. And I forget his name, but he was a black guy, I believe, current military, and yeah, because he had the gun, I'm sure that gave him more confidence while he was able to help these people to a more secure area.
Absolutely, and it just comes down to having the knowledge and knowing how to react in a situation like that. And that's the one benefit of military personnel, is they're trained how to how to respond in that situation, and that makes a huge difference. I heard a really smart quote from my buddy, and like you said, he goes, "When seconds matter, police are minutes away." And I'm not saying to go out there and be a vigilante and try and be a police officer, because none of us are. If you're not a police officer, but don't try and play the vigilante card. Do what you can to the best of your capabilities in a situation that you can't control. And in this situation, nobody could control it except for the person pulling the trigger. But there's things that we could have done during the event and shortly after the event that could have swayed things to go a little better and maybe not have lost so many lives. I guess at the end of the day, the biggest thing is it goes back to education, man. It really just goes back to knowing how to take care of yourself in a situation like that. Like, I know for like my biggest fear was being in a situation like that, or my fiance being in a situation like that and not knowing how to. She didn't grow up around guns. She didn't fire a gun till me and her started dating. And the one thing that I wanted her to learn the most was not only how to shoot a gun, but how to unload a gun, how to separate the ammo from the weapon. So in the event of an active shooter, or what police are now calling active murderers, but in the event of that, to know that if he gets knocked down and drops a weapon, you can unload the weapon so he can't just pick it up and continue his rampage. I feel like that education alone right there is huge. How do you feel about, like, do you think that if we offered, not we, but as a country, if law enforcement agencies offered a class, not even just an active shooter class, but maybe, just a simple firearms class, that it would help people understand why carrying a weapon with you is so important? Do you think that would be a benefit, or not benefit us at all?
I certainly hope it would be a benefit, because obviously that is my belief that if more law-abiding citizens carried, I think we would live in a much more polite society. But honestly, I just think that there's so many people out there that don't care and don't want to get involved, that even if these classes were offered for free, I don't think there's going to be a bunch of mass participation. That's my honest opinion about it.
So the man you were thinking about is Private First Class Glendon Oakley. That was the Army private that actually saved people during that El Paso shooting. Took me a minute to find it, but...
And he is a current member of the military, right?
Yes, stationed in Fort Hood, if I remember correctly.
Fort Hood, wasn't there a shooting there at one time?
There was a shooting there by a military individual at one point.
And just so people are aware, military base or an army base, you cannot have a weapon unless you are military police, correct?
It depends. There's certain stipulations that roll with that. It's all depend on commander's guidance. So you have it's a commander that's in charge of the base and the rules that follow with that base and the certain policies that are upheld on that particular military post. But the biggest if you're on duty, you can carry a weapon, but you're not supposed to technically have a loaded weapon anywhere on base anytime.
See, that to me is just, I guess there's a reason for it, but to me, I guess since I'd never been in the military, I would just think like a military base would be somewhere where you just would not want to go shoot up unless you wanted to die.
Well, what made it convenient for him was he was stationed there.
Hmm.
He was in the military. He was an army. I forget his rank, but he was in the army, stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and he just lost it one day and started shooting people up.
That's another thing, because what is, in your opinion, what's some of the contributing factors to why somebody would go out and commit these mass shootings? Because we've seen it from people from all sorts of walks of life. Now, the media is focusing on how it's mostly white males, and unfortunately, it has been a lot of white males, but we've seen mass shooters of all colors, and we've seen them from different ethnicities. So, I guess my question to you is, what are some of the major contributing factors, in your opinion, to why somebody would go out and do this? Because I don't think video games is a good answer.
Well, first of all, if you're going to blame video games, you need to blame Hollywood too, because they kind of go in hand. They kind of go hand in hand. But I feel like media in general does not convince people to go out and kill as many people as they can. And we discussed this earlier today, but idolizing past mass shooters are probably some of the contributing factors. Definitely, a lot of people want to say bowling. I don't feel like bowling is. I was bullied in school. I was bullied for 3 years, and not once did I ever consider going to school and killing the people that bullied me. And maybe that was just my parents telling me that, you know what, they're just jealous of you, and they know you're going to be better than they are, or whatever the case is. And I guess that to me, bowling is just a scapegoat. It all has to do with, realistically, how they're raised and what they're taught to believe in and how they're taught to react to certain things. We'll go to Jacksonville a couple years ago, Madden tournament. Kid got mad, kid lost, and came back. He was pissed off and shot a bunch of people. That's just the way that you had worded it earlier today was people need to be taught how to learn or how to win and how to lose. And that stuck with me for a while. I mean, it still sticks with me, but you're right. Because like you said, maybe the guy won and he was talking mad crap to this other guy and the other guy just got mad. And that's all about remembering to be humble. Be glad when you win, but also understand that you have to lose to get better. And I feel like honestly, one of the biggest contributing factors, and I don't care who gets offended by what I'm about to say, is bad parenting.
I agree, and I think it's very important for people to understand that most mass shooters, this is proven, come from a single mother household. They did not have a father in their household.
What did they say? It was like 26 out of 27?
Of the recent mass shootings,
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 26 out of 27 of them came from fatherless homes. So I think that is definitely an important thing to highlight.
And that's yeah. And I don't want to tell people that they're bad parents. I don't want to give that stigma. But at the end of the day, I feel like that's probably going to be your biggest contributing factor. Because I couldn't imagine growing up in a house without a father. My father is not my birth father, but he's my father because he was around since I was really little. And it doesn't take much to be that guy, to be that father. Yeah, there's a stigma with today's society about quote unquote baby mamas and baby daddies, and I hate those two terms, and we can address that in another episode, but fatherless families are huge. I mean, it's such a big. I give props to a lot of single moms because they do a lot, but there's certain things that a mom can't do that a father can, and certain things that a mom can't handle the same way that a father can. So I agree. That's why my personal opinion is that it's just bad parenting in general.
I definitely agree that a lot of it definitely starts in the home. But I think you would also agree that there's also something going on outside of the home, outside of parents' controls, that there's just something wrong with our society that is beating people down. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there is something that's just out of the parents' control. Another thing, you brought up earlier bullying. Bullying is a very odd term because they always make it sound like it's always just some overweight kid. Every bully video I've ever seen, where they're doing a demo of what bullying is, it's always an overweight white kid picking on some small, scrawny kid. And eventually the small, scrawny kid either gets support from his peers or he bucks up and stands up to this bully. And everybody lives happily ever after. But bullying comes in so many different forms, and it's just funny to me because they go on these big bully campaigns on how you shouldn't pick on kids and you should stand up for people who are being picked on. But if you're going to try and stop bullying, you have to stop. Where do you stop with that? You have to stop every satire site. You'd have to stop TMZ. TMZ's nothing but gossiping and bullying of celebrities and making fun of people.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Go ahead.
Just to roll on that note. Do you think that media has some influence on excuses for why these things happen?
Absolutely. The media always has some excuse for why it happens. In the past, they've blamed mental illness, and today, they're blaming white supremacy, as you've seen. And it's just incredibly sad because one thing that I've noticed doing research on school shootings and shootings in general, it seems like these school shootings and these mass shootings really multiplied big time after the TV, after basically news was being reported on the TV, because the worst school shooting that happened from the very start was the Austin, Texas tower shooting that happened at the University of Texas back in 1966 by Charles Whitman, and he killed 18 people and injured over 30 more. That same year, another guy in Arizona also shot up a school and killed 5 people, and when he was talking to police, or they might have found a note from him, he had mentioned Charles Whitman. So that tells me that he had heard about this from the news and wanted to be a copycat.
Well, that kind of goes like, look at the amount of copycat serial killers that have been reported that are trying to copy people like Jack the Ripper. Like, it happens. People get this, they see this person, they're like, man, they're like, I could do that, but I could be better. And at the end, some of it also stands up to a lot of maybe people are just trying to one up the other guy, Like, that's kind of what I was figuring when we saw the report of 2 mass shootings in less than 24 hours. My first thought was, what, is somebody trying to compete with the other? Like, that's, like, why is that something people are competing for? Like, why is that even a thought? And I know it's a thought, and I know people think it sometimes, and a lot of times we like to think it and not say it, but we all know that somebody might be trying to one up the other guy, and that's not the way that it should be.
And again, what you and me are talking about here today is just a theory. There's no proof, but it really looks that way, that the news and the media and social media have really fueled the fire on people wanting to go out and one up the last mass shooting because of the notoriety involved. I mean, look at the Vegas shooter. They talked about his life for a week. They dissected his life, who he was involved in, who his father was, who his wife was, his home. I mean, everything about this guy was told, where he hung out in Vegas. I mean, just everything about this guy was told, and it's like some kid who's never had any attention. I mean, why they don't feel like their life's worth living? Why wouldn't they want some notoriety? And it would be a chance to lash out at society and take out some of their anger on people.
You're not wrong.
But again, this is just a theory.
But then when we talk about, let's think about this a little bit, and a little bit more into the weeds here. But what good is the notoriety if they're dead? Like, they can't bask in it, even if they're sitting on death row. It's not like they can be like, yeah, that was me. And I mean, you would think that at some point, if there's somebody who never had attention or never got the hottest prom date or whatever, whatever the reason for, where would that put them if they're sitting 6 feet below the surface of the earth? Like, you would think that at some point that's where they would want to somehow be captured alive, so at least they can bask in that glory.
And that's why I stress the importance. These are theories because that point right there, if they're not alive to enjoy their notoriety, then what good is it? So there's obviously more at play than just notoriety. I mean, there's obviously a lot more anger and hatred involved that we don't really know what the root of, and everybody's kind of scrambling right now to figure that out. But I will say this: the guy that shot up Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland last year, Nicholas Cruz was his name.
I believe so.
He actually lived, and he was arrested by the police, and he's sitting in prison. They say that he has gotten hundreds of letters from young girls basically idolizing him and talking about how handsome he is, and how if they had the chance they would fix him. And so I believe he does get to sit in his cell and read these letters and feel warm and fuzzy inside.
That's another complex that we can't even talk about. Females wanting to fix bad boys. Ugh.
A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the famous serial killers, Ted Bundy, a lot of these mass shooters who have lived, they do have a following of women who do idolize them and will send them letters telling them that they love them. And, but this is something that's never really discussed. It's never really talked about by the media or really by anybody unless they're directly investigating these particular individuals.
Well, that's like, let's go back to Obama's term, the Aurora shooting in Colorado. When the FBI went to investigate his house and search his house, they found his house was completely booby-trapped from the inside. So that goes to show that not everybody, and I believe, if I'm correct, he's actually sitting in prison right now.
Yep.
That it goes to show that maybe it's not just violent video games. This guy obviously was paranoid or had something else going on in his life that made him want to be afraid of people, or maybe just want to eliminate people. So where does that fit into all of this?
In that particular case, he had shot up a theater that was showing The Dark Knight. Or no, it was showing Batman 3, I believe, because this would have been 2012. Yeah, it was Dark Knight
Rises.
Was it Dark Knight Rises?
Is
that what the third one is?
Yeah, The Dark Knight Rises.
Okay. Yeah, so he was shooting up, showing of that, and he was quoting from the Joker, which is from just The Dark Knight, back in 2009 when that was, it was 2008 or 2009 when that was released. Anyway, in that movie, I think that there's a key to a person like that's personality. It's when Bruce Wayne is talking to his butler, I forget his name. Alfred, that's his name. And he was trying to figure out what the Joker wanted. He was like, every criminal wants something. We just got to figure out what this guy wants. And Alfred kindly reminds him that there are some men who just can't be bullied, they can't be bought, they can't be bribed, they just want to watch the world burn. And he didn't even think about that. Bruce Wayne didn't. But a lot of people don't think about that. There are just some people out there that want to see destruction. They want to eliminate people. And they don't really have an agenda necessarily. They're angry, they're hurting, whatever, and they want to destroy.
Now, do you think that they'll ever find a way to kind of like figure these people out before they get to that point of actually causing destruction?
I think people will get figured out all the time. It's just that, every now and then there's somebody who slips through the crack. Or how many times have you heard that there was always red flags about these certain individuals before they even went out and committed these crimes? I mean, just about every one of them, somebody comes forward and says, yeah, this person got arrested for this, but, they spent the night in jail, or they got committed to the hospital and they got released, and there's not a whole lot that's being done.
Or they interview their friend's like, yeah, he always talked about something, doing something like this, and at the end of the day, listen, to our listeners, if you have a friend that's talking about that stuff, maybe you need to tell somebody, because talking about it's one thing, but talking about it can lead into actually doing it. Because if there's no one there to tell them that it's wrong, they're gonna think it's okay. And I can't say that I've ever known somebody like that, but at least nothing comes to memory. But I know that there's so many red flags out there, and I think that goes back to the whole education thing about maybe just learning about that kind of stuff. I know the military gets trained on how to like see like people that are trying to get inside information, and so it's kind of the same concept. If people are trying to figure out, the best place where there's going to be the most amount of people to do the most amount of damage, and they're asking questions, maybe not in that sense, but maybe paraphrase a little differently. Maybe that's something you need to bring forward. Whether you go talk to a police officer about it, don't call the cops on them and tell them, oh, this guy's planning to shoot some people, but just be like, hey, you guys should probably keep an eye on this guy because he's been talking some crazy stuff. And at the end of the day, if he hates you for watching out for him, I mean, he's gonna hate you. But wouldn't you rather know that at the end of the day, you did something about it instead of not doing something about it, and hopefully save some lives? Because maybe he is that guy that would take his words and put them into actions. I mean, I don't really know how else to word this.
See, and I don't even know how to really go about it, because if I were to go to the police and say, hey, Bob is talking about shooting up a place, one of two things is either going to happen. Either the police are just going to maybe take the report and that's about it, or, that they might take the report and go talk to Bob, but, at the end of the day, there's just not a whole lot that they can do as long as this individual hasn't done anything yet. So
no, but it's kind of like putting a bug in your ear about like what I want for my birthday or what I want for Christmas. You kind of plant that seed, and they can start kind of monitoring a little bit of it and seeing exactly how radical his beliefs are, how extreme he is about the things he does, and that could give a good indication on how to go about that from the forward. Once you do your part and report it, it's not up to you to see how it gets finished.
And I definitely agree with that. And I think that people report people just about I would say every day people are getting reported for stuff like this. And officers have to go and speak to people, about what was reported about them. And so I do think a lot of this stuff is prevented before it starts. But the question is that this still is happening, and people just want to know why. And honestly, I can't give them a reason, but I definitely don't think a politician can give them a reason either why this is happening.
I don't think a politician can give them a fix either.
Nope.
I guess, do you remember the Las Vegas shooter? They were talking about how he had a history of domestic violence. Do you remember reading that in an article somewhere?
I do.
Do you think that is a situation that occurs with any of these past, more recent, I guess, active shooters? Because in going back a little bit, except for the Vegas shooting where the gentleman happened to be older, most of these guys are pretty young.
Yes.
And I wonder if it's not just something that was instilled in our generation that makes these people believe such radical beliefs. And I can't imagine what's going through their head when they're like, you know what, I'm just going to go shoot this place up. Because, I mean, I couldn't imagine doing that. I don't think, honestly, excuse my French, I don't think I'd have the balls to do it.
Oh, and honestly, you got to have enough. You have to have enough hatred in you. People think that they are full of hatred, or they think that they're angry, or whatever. And we all have some angry parts to us, but most of us are not angry enough to actually do something like that and go and shoot people up. I mean, that's a special type of angry. And also, I'd say a lot of these mass shooters aren't necessarily intelligent, but I bet you some of them are probably pretty intelligent. So it's not something I can say is done by pure stupidity. I think a lot of them know that at the end of it, they're probably not going to be alive, or that their life's never going to be the same. Most mass shooters don't seem to have a plan to get out of there. They kind of just, it's almost like a suicide, but I'm going to take as many with me as I can type mentality.
So suicide by cop with collateral damage.
That's what my theory is on a lot of them, yeah.
I definitely agree that I feel like some of them are a lot more intelligent than we think they are. And I feel like that might be a reason or a contributing factor, a minor contributing factor, as to why they do what they do, because they're like, haha, watch this. It's kind of like the whole hold my beer thing. And at that point, it's just, where do we really continue? And so when we talk about like blaming individuals, like everybody always wants to find somebody in the wake of any tragedy. We always want to find somebody to blame, and unfortunately, right now it happens to be the president. But at the end of the day, we can't blame anybody but the gunmen themselves. Like, I understand it's a lot easier to blame somebody that might still be living and breathing, but I mean, why do you think people are so set on blaming somebody that's not even halfway involved in what's going on? Like what do you think about that?
I think it's just part of human nature, unfortunately. It's one of those ugly parts of human nature that, because in most of these cases the gunman is either dead or they're in, maximum security at this point, most people want to find somebody to hold responsible. They want a scapegoat because they feel that, I think in their mind, they feel if they can find somebody or something to destroy or dethrone or change, that they have beat this tragedy, that they have basically prevented the next tragedy.
So kind of like a coping mechanism as well.
It is definitely nothing but a coping mechanism, but as you and me see, and many other people see, it is a false sense of hope. It is only a temporary fix for an emotional response.
Well, and who says, like, yes, now it's a mass or it's a shooter? Who's not to say next time it's going to be a machete-wielding jungleman who's going to walk into a grocery store and just start chopping people up? Like, we don't know. And just because this one happened to be a gun, like, what do we do at that point? Who are we going to blame at that point if it's a stabbing spree that kills 20 people, or somebody plows into a crowd of people killing 30 or 40 people? Like, we'll go back to London. What was that, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Roughly. It was about 4 years ago. ISIS took credit for that, but whatever. But that's one of those situations where gun control and the whole thought of gun control, and it won't work in that aspect of trying to keep mass killing, we won't say mass shooting, but mass killing from happening, because it will happen. And unfortunately, as much as I don't want to jinx this, but it will happen again. But next time it might not be a gun that does the killing.
Right.
It might be something much more violent.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine being plowed into by a vehicle and sitting there as I bleed out, or I can't breathe because I have a punctured lung and I basically suffocate to death. Like, anything can be turned into a weapon, and we've talked about it, and we discussed this a little earlier and whatnot. But at the end of the day, there's not much that we can do besides educate ourselves on how to prevent this stuff. And that's going to be the biggest key that we're going to take away from this, is education is huge. And that goes for anything. Educate, I mean, before you drive a car, what do you got to do?
You gotta learn how to drive.
You got to read a book and take a test.
Right.
You
well,
know?
to legally drive, yeah.
Well, yeah. But what I'm saying is education, you know?
See, and I guess I disagree with education as a whole, because education is one thing. I mean, education, whenever I hear the word education, I'm just thinking brainwash. And that's just kind of how I was conditioned. Experience, I think, carries much more waves than education. And I think the best education comes through experience. Because we could sit in a classroom and talk about guns all day and, tell somebody who's never picked up a gun, this is how you unload a gun. But if we put a gun in that person's hand, with no ammunition, obviously, but we told them, okay, this is how you load the magazine, this is how you eject the magazine, this is how you chamber one, I think that person will remember that much more than anything they ever could read online, or if they read it from a book.
No, 100%.
That experience.
And that's why when I asked about possibly providing these courses to people that want them, how beneficial it would be. And I feel, like you said, it's that experience that's going to stick with them longer than just maybe reading a book about it. And you're right, you're 100% correct. And it just comes down to wanting to know the way to handle a situation and how to properly handle that situation. But we all know that when we're under pressure, and thank the Lord that I haven't been put in that position, or you haven't been put in that position. But when you're under pressure, but a lot of people think that your mind just goes blank, but it doesn't. It's once you've done it, once you trained yourself for so long on how to do certain things, those certain things come back into play. I mean, you work corrections for a while, and your PPCT, when an inmate decides to get rough with you, like you may not have done PPCT for a while, but it comes back to you almost immediately, and it's all part of that training. And I get that people don't have time to do it, don't have time to do this, don't have time to do that, but it doesn't have to be all the time. Just a little bit of the time, maybe 10 minutes on a Saturday, sit down, practice what you're trying to accomplish, because you never know when that's going to kick in and actually save you. It kind of goes to like combat medics and paramedics in situations where people are like injured. They have to remember all this training, and they go through rigorous training to be able to do what they do, and to be in a high pressure situation and still remember all that. You'd be surprised how much your memory actually retains when you actually get put in a position to use what you know.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And you're going to use what you know basically from what you've practiced, from what you have trained in. And that's the other thing that I would like to ask you about, is that it seems like people almost have a mentality today that if you're not in this specific field, then you don't need to be training this. You don't need to be worrying about this. Like, they say that the police should be the ones that are dealing with these mass shooters because they're trained. And obviously, if police is in the area, then they should be dealing with these mass shooters because they are trained. They have the firearm. They have the legal authority to do so. But like when it comes to CPR, obviously an EMT is going to be your person to utilize life-saving measures. However, we're talking about those times that they aren't there for another couple minutes, and seconds matter, like you said earlier. But I guess my question to you is do you feel like people are just incredibly oblivious? They're too busy on their phones to want to even practice anything, whether it be a martial art or CPR, or they'd rather scroll through their phone all day, and in the face of tragedy, they end up being a sitting duck while they're expecting somebody else to handle it for them.
So the takeover of technology is something we can cover in another episode, but 100%, as a generation, we've gotten really comfortable walking and being on our phones, knowing how to kind of see what's kind of in our periphs, but not really looking around us. And I think, and at least for me, anytime I go anywhere, anytime that I'm out in public, I never stop looking around. And that's because situational awareness is key for every situation that you're in. And I know that sounds really cliche and really cheesy, but the thing is, if I know who's around me and what they're doing, I can predict what's going to happen next 90% of the time. And so that would have been one of those situations where the El Paso shooter, he had to walk from his car to the door carrying a weapon. How many people do you think were in that parking lot? I don't know about you, man, but our Walmart here in town, unless it's 2:30 in the morning, is usually pretty freaking busy. And I'm telling you, people saw it and people did nothing about it. And maybe they didn't see him because they were scrolling through their phone. And it takes me back to just thinking about, take that 5-minute that 5-minute challenge and be off your phone for 5 minutes. Take a look around you. Observe what's going on. Try and figure out, the best way to do something. Whenever I go into a restaurant, I always, it's kind of makes me sound paranoid, but I always try and know where the exits are. I always try to know where the quickest place for cover is. And simply for that reason. And it's not because I'm paranoid or I'm scared. It's because I want to be prepared. And that's why. And I always try and sit close to the door. I sit with my back to the wall because you never know when somebody's going to go postal. And so, yeah, do I think that technology plays a part into the prevention of mass killings? Absolutely. Technology is huge because we don't want to put our phones down because, oh man, we might miss this tweet, we might miss this Instagram post, we might, oh man, I didn't watch that dog video on Facebook, now I gotta go find it again. I gotta respond to this text so my boyfriend doesn't get mad or my girlfriend doesn't get mad. Like, we need to get ourselves out of the habit of being on our phones 100% of the time. Set the phone down. Observe what's around you. Actually see what's going on. And kind of gauge what you're going to do based on that. Because, I mean, I've seen some questionable people in public before. And you know that old phrase, trust your gut instinct? When something doesn't feel right, you know it's not right. And I don't care who you are. Everybody has a gut instinct of some kind. And some are better than others, yes. But when you go somewhere and something doesn't feel right. I mean, I know I got a gut instinct. What about you, Josh?
Absolutely. I got a gut instinct about just about everything. Sometimes, most of the time, it turns out to be nothing, but I'd rather be over-prepared than under-prepared any day for tragedy.
And that's why we stress so much about education and not even education, but education/training. And it's not about being paranoid. It's just about being ready. And, you know, if we really as a country want to prevent mass shootings from happening or mass killings, we need to start educating ourselves and training ourselves and preparing ourselves for the worst. And that's, unfortunately, as bad as it sounds in today's society, that's kind of a big thing. And, I mean, we read about